The first thing Adaeze did when she arrived at the Seoul Grand Hyatt was spill a full tray of champagne on the most dangerous man in Korea. Not a little spill, not the polite, apologetic kind that ruins a lapel and ends with a dry cleaning bill. This was a catastrophic, slow-motion, physics-defying waterfall of 12 crystal flutes cascading directly onto a man in a black suit who had not moved fast enough because clearly no one had spilled anything on him. The room went quiet in stages. First the people closest, then the ripple outward, then completely. Adaeze stood in the wreckage with an empty tray at her side and looked at the man in front of her. He was tall. He was very still, his suit soaked from the collar to the hem of his jacket. His expression had not changed in any direction she could read. He simply looked at her the way a man looks at a thing that has happened and cannot be unhappened. She looked at him. He looked at her. She opened her mouth and said, with complete and genuine sincerity, "You stepped into my path." The silence thickened. Somewhere behind her, her colleague Patience made a sound that was either a gasp or the beginning of a prayer. Possibly both. The man blinked. Once, slowly, like a man who had not expected those specific words to arrive in this specific order. "I stepped into your path," he repeated. "You came from the left," Adaeze said. She was aware this was not helping. She was aware of exactly how many people were watching. She was also 6 weeks into a contract that paid her 3 times what any catering job in Lagos had ever offered. And her dignity was the one thing she had brought to Seoul that still belonged entirely to her. The tray path is established. The path was mine first. A man behind him, broad-shouldered and watchful, took a small step forward. The man in the wetsuit raised one hand without looking at the broad-shouldered man. The step stopped. He looked at Adaeze. At her face first, then briefly, professionally at the empty tray, then back at her face. Something moved in his eyes, something that was not anger, which was the one thing she had been bracing for. "Are you all right?" he asked. She had been prepared for approximately 12 different responses. That was not one of them. "I'm fine," she said. "Are you—" She stopped. He was soaking wet. The answer was obvious. "I'm fine," he said. He picked up one of the fallen flutes from the floor. I examined it briefly, set it on a nearby table. "Clean this up," he said to no one in particular and to everyone, "and bring a fresh tray." He walked away from her without looking back, and the crowd parted for him the way water parted for something that moved through it with certainty. His jacket was completely destroyed. He did not appear to notice. Adaeze stood in the middle of the Seoul International Charity Gala with her empty tray and her pulse running very fast, and told herself this was fine. This was absolutely fine. If you are new to this channel, welcome. Before we go any further into this story, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now, because what you are about to watch is going to make you feel things you were not ready for tonight. Like, comment, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let us get back to Adaeze, because her evening has only just started. Her name was Adaeze Okonkwo, and she was 29 years old, 5'9" without the heels she was currently wearing for the catering uniform, built in the way that made doorways feel like reasonable negotiations, and possessed of a confidence that her mother called stubbornness and her 2 older sisters called a gift from a god who had excellent taste. She had come to Seoul on a 6-month catering contract with a staffing agency that specialized in high-end event work for clients who paid in full and did not ask questions. She had taken the contract because the money was real and the experience was real, and Lagos, for the first time in her life, had felt too small to hold what she was trying to build. She had not come to Seoul to be noticed. She had come to work. She had been working with some success for 6 weeks, right up until the moment she relocated the champagne supply onto a man she would later learn was called Seo Kangmin, and that Seo Kangmin was not, technically, someone you spilled things on. She learned this from Patience, who delivered the information in a fierce and whispered summary in the kitchen 30 minutes later, while Adaeze refilled a fresh tray. "Do you know who that was?" Patience said. "A man in a suit," Adaeze said. "Adaeze. A tall man in a suit. He runs half of the private logistics network in Greater Seoul," Patience said. "Not the legal half, the other half." Adaeze paused. She looked at the tray. She looked at Patience. "Both halves?" Enough of both halves to make the distinction irrelevant, Patience said. When people call him Chairman CEO to his face and various other things when he is not in the room, none of which I will repeat in a building this expensive. He asked if I was all right, Adaeze said. Patience stared at her. What? When I dropped the champagne, first thing he said, he asked if I was all right. Patience was quiet for a moment. That is new information, she said, in the tone of a woman filing it somewhere carefully. Adaeze picked up the tray and went back out. She did not see him again for the rest of the evening. The gala continued in its glossy, self-congratulatory way. The charity raised what charities raised at events where the canapés cost more than most people's rent. Adaeze worked efficiently, navigated the room. I moved her tray through the crowd with the particular grace of a woman who had learned early that you could take up space confidently. At 10:15 she was collecting empty glasses near the east window when she became aware that someone was standing just behind her left shoulder. Not in the busy room way, where people were always somewhere, in the specific, deliberate way of someone who had chosen that position. She turned. Seo Kangmin was in a different suit. Dry, black again, because apparently the man owned a wardrobe with a very clear thesis. He had his hands in his pockets, and he was looking at her with the expression she was already learning to read as his default. Direct, composed, not giving anything away for free. You're still here, he said. My shift ends at 11, she said. He looked at her for a moment. You didn't apologize, he said. I explained, she said. There's a difference. He considered this. He did not appear to disagree with it. Where are you from? Ghana, she said, because she always said Ghana in Seoul, because Seoul understood Ghana, and the longer answer about being Nigerian Ghanaian by way of two parents with competing home loyalties was a conversation for people she planned to know for more than 6 minutes. You speak Korean, he said. My agency requires intermediate level, she said. I tested advanced. He looked at her the way people looked at things that had surprised them when they had believed themselves unsurprisable. Your name, he said. Adaeze, she said. How do you say it? He said. She told him. He said it. Exactly right. First try. She looked at him. He looked at her. He said nothing further. He turned and walked back into the crowd in the same composed, unhurried way he'd done everything else, and she stood by the east window with her tray and told herself that conversation meant nothing. A powerful man in a crowd at a charity gala asking a caterer's name meant nothing. The fact that he had said her name correctly on the first attempt was completely irrelevant. She went back to work. She had almost successfully convinced herself, by the time she got home that night, that the entire evening was behind her. She had spilled champagne on a dangerous man, survived the encounter, and it was over. These things happened. She was fine. She was moving forward. Her phone rang at 7:42 the next morning. The number was not in her contacts. She answered it the way she answered all unknown numbers, one which was directly and without preamble. Adaeze Okonkwo, she said, you left your badge at the event. The voice was immediately recognizable, the specific quality of it, low and composed and not spending a single syllable it didn't need to. The Hyatt has it at the front desk. They called the agency. The agency called my office for some reason I am still looking into. She sat up in bed. Your office? I am on the event committee, he said. Then why are you calling me yourself? He paused, not a long pause, the kind that said the question had registered rather than the kind that said he didn't have an answer. The agency is closed, he said. You should pick it up before noon. I appreciate the information, she said. Thank you. He ended the call. She sat in bed and looked at her phone and told herself he was being efficient. A man on an event committee managing logistics. This was a logistical call. She happened to have dropped the tray on the committee member with the most eventful evening. He was being thorough. This was nothing. She picked up the badge before noon. The front desk attendant handed it over with a small envelope that had her name on it, in handwriting she did not recognize. She opened it in the elevator. Inside was a card. On the card was a number and 3 words. For future reference, no name, no explanation. Just the number and the 3 words. She stood in the elevator with the card in her hand and looked at it for 2 full floors. She did not throw it away. And she told herself she was keeping it for professional reasons because the man was on the event committee, and professional network connections were relevant, and this was a sound decision based on reasonable logic. She put the card in her wallet. The second time she saw him was not by accident. Her agency sent her a specialty assignment 3 days later, private lunch service for a corporate meeting in the Mapo district. She arrived at the address and understood immediately that the address was not a restaurant. It was an office building. A very clean, very quiet office building with a security desk and the kind of stillness that expensive buildings developed when every person in them moved with purpose. The broad-shouldered man from the gala was at the security desk. He looked at her when she came in. He looked at her catering case. He looked at her face. "Okonkwo," he said. She did not know how he knew her name. She decided not to ask. "I have a lunch delivery for level 20. He let her through. Level 20 was a boardroom. The meeting was not yet in session. She set up the service in the adjoining room, and she was laying out the final plates when the boardroom door opened and voices came through. And among the voices was one she recognized. She kept her eyes on the plates. She heard him stop. She finished the placement of the last plate and straightened and turned, and he was standing in the doorway of the adjoining room with his jacket unbuttoned and his expression doing the specific thing it had done at the gala. The same focused attention. The same quality of a man encountering something he had not arranged. "Your agency sent you," he said. "Yeah, my agency sent me," she said. He looked at the food. He looked at her. "You have an advanced Korean test score and you're working catering. A person can have multiple things," she said. He held her gaze for 2 seconds. "Stay for the setup," he said. "You can leave when service starts." He went back into the boardroom and the door closed. She stayed. She managed the service. When the soup came out, a man at the far end of the table made a comment about the presentation in rapid Korean that was clearly not intended for the caterer to understand. It was not a polite comment. It was the kind of comment that men in expensive suits made when they believed no one in the room shared their language. Adaeze set the soup down in front of him. She straightened. She looked at him and said in clear and precise Korean, "The presentation is designed for optimal heat retention. The arrangement you're suggesting would cool the broth by 4 degrees. The table went quiet. The man looked at her. He looked at his soup. He looked at the table. She moved to the next setting. From the head of the table, she felt eyes on her back. She did not turn around. She finished the service and went back to the preparation room and packed her case. His voice came from the doorway at 1:45. "What do you actually do?" he said. "Not what the agency sends you to do. What do you do?" She turned. He was leaning against the doorframe with his jacket fully buttoned again, which she had learned meant the meeting was over. "I'm building a catering and events management company," she said. "I came to Seoul for capital exposure and operational experience in a high-volume market." He looked at her for a long moment. "How long is your contract?" 5 months remaining." He nodded once. He straightened from the doorframe. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and placed a business card on the counter beside her case. "When the contract ends," he said, "if you haven't found what you came for?" He left. She looked at the card. Different from the hotel envelope, this one had a company name and a title and a direct line. She put it in her wallet next to the other one. She told herself this was professional networking and she fully believed it for approximately 6 hours. The third encounter happened because of a woman named Yuna. Yuna was 24 years old and worked in the SEO organization in a capacity that Adaeze did not immediately understand, but which clearly involved knowing everything about everything before it happened. She appeared at the door of the staffing agency 3 weeks later when Adaeze was reviewing her schedule at the front desk, and she handed over a catering inquiry form that was extremely thorough and had clearly been prepared by someone who either cared very much about event logistics or had been told to care very much about event logistics by someone who cared about getting the details right. The inquiry was for a private dinner, 12 guests, SEO private residence, Yongsan. Adaeze looked at the form. She looked at Yuna. "Your organization has a preferred vendor list," she said. "Mr. Seo has made a personal referral," Yuna said. One with the composed professionalism of someone who had delivered stranger information with less explanation and intended to continue doing so. Adaeze took the form. She should not have taken the form. She fully understood she should not have taken the form. She took it anyway. The private dinner was on a Thursday. She arrived with a team of 2 and spent the afternoon in the kitchen of an apartment that was, in the specific and technical sense of the word, breathtaking. Not ostentatious. That was the thing. A man with Seo Kangmin's resources could have built something that screamed. This was the opposite. Clean lines and the specific calm of a space that had been designed by someone who understood that the most expensive thing you could have was nothing unnecessary. She was plating the entree when he came into the kitchen, and he did not look at the food first. He looked at her. He did this, she was starting to realize, as a consistent practice. He saw the person before the context. "The guests arrive in 40 minutes, he said. "The food will be ready in 35, she said. He picked up a spoon from the counter. She looked at him. He looked at her. He dipped the spoon into the sauce she had been adjusting for the last 20 minutes. "What is this?" he said. "Egusi reduction with Korean doenjang," she said. "I've been developing the balance for 2 months." He tasted it. He held the flavor for a moment the way people did when something had genuinely surprised them. "This is yours," he said. Not a question. "The concept is mine," she said. "The ingredients are mostly Korean." He set the spoon down. He looked at her across the kitchen. "Juan, you're building something," he said. "Yes," she said. "What does it need?" She looked at him. She had learned, across 3 encounters, that he did not ask things he did not mean. He was not making conversation. He was asking. "Capital and a client list in a market where I have no history," she said. "Same as everyone starting something real." He looked at her for a long moment. "The guests tonight," he said, "include 2 of the founders of the Hangang Development Fund and the managing director of a distribution chain with 43 restaurant partners." She held his gaze. "Make sure they taste the sauce," he said. He walked out of the kitchen. She stood at the counter and looked at the pot of egusi reduction and understood that something had shifted, and that she was standing at the beginning of something that had not yet declared itself completely, and that the man who had just walked out of her kitchen was both the opportunity and the complication, and she was going to have to decide what to do with both. She made sure they tasted the sauce. The managing director of the distribution chain stopped mid-conversation to ask who had developed the dish. 3 of the other guests asked for the concept's contact information. By the time the dinner ended and she was packing the kitchen, she had 4 serious inquiries and 1 tentative investor conversation scheduled for the following week. Kangmin was in the living room when she finished. The guests had gone. He was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the Han River, a glass of something dark and simple in one hand, and he did not turn when she came through. "The food was excellent," he said. "The guest list was strategic," she said. "Both things can be true," he said. She stopped in the middle of the room. She had her coat on. Her case was by the door. She had every intention of leaving. "Why are you doing this?" she said. He turned. He looked at her across the room. The Han River was behind him, lit by the city, moving through the dark. He considered the question the way he considered everything, with the full weight of his attention. "Because you told me I stepped into your path," he said, "and you were right, and the view from here is better." She held his gaze. She was 29 years old, and she had built herself from scratch in a city that was not her own, and she knew exactly what she was looking at when she looked at a man who saw her clearly. It was both the most straightforward and the most dangerous thing she had encountered in Seoul, and she was standing in it now. "Good night, Mr. Seo," she said. "Good night, Adaeze," he said. Her name, again, exactly right. She left. She walked to the elevator with her case and her coat, and the full knowledge that she had just left a room she was going to think about for a very long time. She was right. The investor conversation the following week was with a woman named Director Lim, who arrived in an office that Adaeze had borrowed from the staffing agency's meeting suite and delivered exactly the kind of conversation that Adaeze had been preparing for since she was 22 and had cooked her first large-scale event out of a community kitchen in Accra, with no budget and a belief in the food that was bigger than the evidence. Director Lim was interested. She was not yet committed. She gave Adaeze 90 days to show her a business model that held. She left the meeting, and Adaeze sat in the borrowed office for 5 minutes after, and then stood up and went to the window and permitted herself 30 seconds of feeling exactly what she felt, which was enormous. Then she picked up her phone and called her mother in Lagos. She did not call Kangmin. She was very clear about that decision. He called her. Director Lim texted me, he said. She texted you, Adaeze said. She has a habit of updating the people who made introductions, he said. He paused. She rarely says positive things. She said positive things. Adaeze sat down on the edge of her bed. You didn't tell me you knew Director Lim. You didn't ask about the guest list. She held the phone and looked at the ceiling. This is a complicated situation, she said. Yes, he said. I don't mix professional and personal, she said. I know, he said. Then why? Because what I'm doing is professional, he said. The introduction was professional. The dinner was professional. What I'm also doing is not professional, and I am aware of the difference, and I am not trying to confuse them for you. She held the phone. She could hear the city through his end of the line, on the particular sound of Seoul at night from a high floor, and she had memorized the view from his window without meaning to. I'm going to be here for 5 more months, she said. I know, he said, and then I don't know where I'll be. I know that too, he said. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not asking you to know where you'll be. I'm asking if you want to have dinner. Not the kind I provide clients. The other kind. She sat with that for a long time. He waited. He was very good at waiting. Thursday, she said. He said nothing for a moment. Then, Thursday. The dinner was quiet and warm, and they talked for 3 hours, and he listened with the full, specific attention he gave everything, and she talked about the kitchen in Accra, and the community center in Lagos, and the 2 years she spent cooking in London and learning the back end of a business while she thought she was just learning the food. And he talked a little carefully about building something that the world did not fully see, and the cost of that and the parts of it that he was still working out. She looked at him across the table. You don't talk about your work to people, she said. No, he said, but you're talking about it now. He looked at her. You're not people, he said. She should have left well enough alone. She did not. What does that mean? She said. He held her gaze for a long time. And the restaurant was warm around them, and there was soft music somewhere, and the Han River was visible through the window, and none of it felt like Seoul anymore. It felt like the inside of something. It means I came to that gala on a Tuesday evening, he said, because the committee required my presence and I had no intention of enjoying it. And a woman with a tray stepped into the wrong path and told me with complete confidence that it was my fault. He held his glass. And I haven't stopped thinking about that woman since. Adaeze looked at him. She picked up her own glass. She took a sip. She set it down. You're going to be very annoying to know, she said. He almost smiled. Almost. It was less than a smile and more than nothing, and it was the first time she had seen his face do anything unmanaged. Probably, he said. When she looked at her glass, she looked at him. I'm not changing my plans, she said. The business, the direction, it goes where I'm taking it. I know, he said. And I won't be managed, she said. I hadn't planned to, he said. I'm serious, she said. I've had this conversation with men who said that and meant the opposite. He looked at her. He set down his glass and folded his hands and looked at her with the complete and direct attention that was, she had learned, as close to a declaration as Seo Kangmin got. I watched you correct a man at my table in his own language because he underestimated you, he said. I watched you redesign a sauce tradition that's centuries old and make it better. When I watched you walk into a room full of people who had more money than you and understand within 4 minutes which ones were worth talking to. He paused. What exactly would I be managing? She held his gaze. Thursday was good, she said. Yes, he said. Let's do Friday too, she said. He said nothing. His expression did the unmanaged thing again, slightly more than the first time. Friday, he said. If you have been watching since the beginning of this story and you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Go ahead, do it right now and come back, because this is the part where things stop being simple. Things stopped being simple on a Monday morning, 6 days after the second dinner. Her phone rang at 6:30 a.m. The number was not one she knew. She answered it. The voice on the other end was a woman, older, on the specific composure of someone who had spent a long time in a room with power and absorbed its accent. "Miss Okonkwo," the woman said, "my name is Chairwoman Seo. I believe you know my son." Adaeze sat up in bed. She was fully awake immediately. "Chairwoman Sao. I think it would be useful for us to meet," the woman said, "purely socially. I understand you are building something in Seoul, and I have some contacts in the industry that might be of value. Shall we say tomorrow? Lunch. I'll have my assistant send you the address." The address arrived 4 minutes later. It was a private club in Gangnam that Adaeze had read about in a business profile 3 weeks ago. She put the phone down and looked at the ceiling and understood that this was not a lunch about her business. She went anyway, because Adaeze Okonkwo did not avoid rooms. Chairwoman Seo was 71 and looked 60, and carried herself with the architectural precision of a woman who had decided exactly what she was at 40 and had not revised since. She was already seated when Adaeze arrived. She looked at Adaeze the way she probably looked at most things, assessing, thorough, with the warmth of someone who had learned to perform warmth more precisely than people who actually felt it. "You're very striking," Chairwoman Seo said. "I was told you were. My son doesn't usually require telling." Adaeze sat. She placed her bag on the chair beside her. She looked at the chairwoman directly. "Thank you for the invitation," she said. "He is 34 years old," Chairwoman Seo said, without transition, the way people moved through conversations when they had decided what the conversation was. "He has built something extraordinary, and he has a tendency, when he becomes interested in a person, to become interested in a way that is—" She paused. She chose her word. "Comprehensive." "I see," Adaeze said. "I'm sure you do," the chairwoman said. "You seem like someone who sees things quickly." She picked up her tea. "I am not here to be unpleasant. I want to be clear about that. I have nothing against you personally. You are clearly talented. The Director Lim introduction alone tells me my son thinks highly of you, and his professional judgment is rarely wrong." "But," Adaeze said. "But," Chairwoman Seo said, "the organization he has built operates on relationships that have been developed across 20 years. The alliances, the trust, on the specific equilibrium that keeps things functional. All of this is very sensitive to disruption. And a woman who arrives from nowhere, with no history in this world, who captures his attention this completely, this quickly, is a disruption," Adaeze said. "Is a variable," Chairwoman Seo said, "and I don't like variables." Adaeze held the woman's gaze. She reached into her bag. She took out the investor report she had been preparing for Director Lim. She placed it on the table. "I am not a variable," she said. "I am a woman building a company. I am not building it on your son's name or his connections or his goodwill. The introductions he has made are ones I could have found myself with 6 more weeks and a different event assignment. What he is to me personally is separate from what I am doing professionally, and I keep those things separate because I built them both, and I'm not trading one for the other." She picked the report back up and put it in her bag. "I am having lunch with you," she said, "because I respect that you wanted to see me face to face rather than work from a distance, which is more honest than most people manage. I also want you to understand that the version of this conversation where I agree to disappear for the sake of someone else's comfort is not a version that exists." Chairwoman Seo looked at her for a long time. "You have no fear," she said. It was not a compliment, and it was not a criticism. It was an observation. "I have appropriate fear," Adaeze said. "I just don't perform it." Chairwoman Seo set down her tea, and something moved in her face that was not the performance of warmth, something that was, possibly, actual. "My son said you told him he stepped into your path," she said. "He did," Adaeze said. For the first time, Chairwoman Seo looked at something that might have been the beginning of a smile. It did not fully arrive, but it went somewhere. "Eat something," she said. "The fish here is very good." Adaeze ate the fish. It was very good. The walk back from the Gangnam Club took 40 minutes, which was longer than it needed to take. She did not take a cab. She needed the air and the time and the particular sensation of her own feet on Seoul pavement to process what had just happened. One which was that a woman she had never met had looked at her with the specific calculation of someone deciding how removable she was, and she had sat through it and eaten the fish and not flinched, and now she needed to walk it through. Her phone buzzed, a message from Yuna, which was how most communications from that direction arrived. Formatted, clear, no unnecessary words. Mr. CEO is available at 3 p.m. if you need to discuss the supplier follow-up from Monday. She texted back, confirm 3 p.m., thanks. She walked another block. The Han River was visible at the end of the street in a blue afternoon line. She stood and looked at it for a moment. The truth, which she had not said to the chairwoman and would not say to Kangmin yet, was this. She had come to Seoul for capital and operational experience, and all of that was true. And she had also come because Lagos had felt for the first time like a place that was too familiar. Like a place where she already knew the shape of who she was and what she was building, and she had needed to take that shape somewhere it wasn't recognized and see if it held. It had held. It was holding. It was holding in ways she had not anticipated, in rooms she had not expected, beside a man she had not planned. She walked back to her apartment and changed clothes and went to the supplier meeting. She did not tell Kangmin about the lunch. She told herself this was because she was processing it. She told herself this for 3 days. On the 4th day, she came into a meeting she had arranged with a potential supplier and found the supplier sitting across from a man she had never seen before, who looked at her when she came in and said, one in the tone of someone delivering information that was not a question, Miss Okonkwo, the terms of this partnership will need to go through the parent company for review. She understood immediately that there was no parent company issue with the partnership. She understood that the parent company was being used as a structural delay. She understood that this was the version of Chairwoman CEO's objection that worked from a distance. She sat down. She took out her contract draft. She placed it on the table. She said very pleasantly, "What a coincidence. I have the contract framework here. Would you like to go through it now, or should I send it directly to the parent company's legal team? I have that contact already." She did not have the contact. She had the contact 40 minutes later, and after a very productive phone call with Director Lim's assistant, whom she had made a point of maintaining a warm professional relationship with since the investor meeting. The man across the table looked at her. He made a call. He came back. The parent company review was no longer required. She went home that evening and called Kangmin. "Your mother arranged a lunch," she said. Silence, very controlled, the specific quality of a silence that was doing work. "When?" he said. 4 days ago, she said. 4 days? He stopped. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was deciding whether I needed to," she said. "And?" "She also reached into a supplier meeting today," Adaeze said. "Through a person I don't know. I handled it, but you need to know it happened." She heard him breathe, not the usual measured breath, the other kind. "On, I will speak to her," he said. His voice had the quality she had heard once before in a description of him from Yuna, the specific low register of a man who had decided something. "I'm not asking you to fight on my behalf," she said. "I'm asking you to make clear that this is not acceptable. There is a difference." "I know," he said. He paused. "Are you all right?" She sat on the edge of her bed. She had been asked that question once before, under very different circumstances, and it had landed strangely both times. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm better than fine. I handled it." "I know you did," he said. "I'm still asking." She held the phone and looked at the window, where Seoul was lit up in its permanent illuminated sprawl. "Yes," she said, "I'm all right." What happened next happened quickly. It required Adaeze to make a decision she had not expected to make for at least another 3 months. The decision arrived in the form of a phone call from Director Lim, who told her that the investment committee had moved the timeline forward and needed a formal presentation in 10 days. 10 days, a presentation that was supposed to take her 30. She worked for 9 of those 10 days with 4 hours of sleep and coffee, and the particular fury of a woman who had been moving toward something for 7 years and could see it clearly now. She rebuilt the model. She restructured the proposal. She called in every contact she had built in Seoul, and 3 she had built in London before she left, and 2 she had built in Accra that she had not yet needed. She did not call Kangmin, not because she did not want to, and because she needed to do this part alone. The doing of it alone was the point. The point was that this thing she was building belonged to her in a way that nothing borrowed could belong to you, and the moments when you proved that to yourself were not moments you shared in real time. They were the private architecture of what you were becoming. Patience called on the seventh night. "You sound terrible," Patience said. "I'm fine," Adaeze said. "You said the same thing to the scary man at the gala, and you were also not fine then," Patience said. "I was absolutely fine then," Adaeze said. "You had dumped champagne on a crime lord," Patience said. "He stepped into my path," Adaeze said. Patience was quiet for a moment. "How did it get here from there?" she said, in the tone of a woman genuinely asking. Adaeze set down her pen. She looked at the ceiling. "I don't fully know," she said, "but it got here." "He's a good man," Patience said. "I've been asking around since October." "You've been asking around since October," Adaeze said. "Somebody had to," Patience said. "You were clearly not going to ask the right questions." A pause. "He is a complicated man who moves in complicated spaces, but the people who know him from close range, the ones who aren't afraid to answer, they say the same things." "What do they say?" Adaeze said. "That he's fair," Patience said, "and that he keeps his word. In that world, those are the two things that matter, and they're the hardest to be." Another pause. "And Yuna said he learned your name before the gala ended and practiced the pronunciation before he called you the next morning." Adaeze was quiet. "Moz, I'm telling you this," Patience said, "because you are about to present the most important thing you have ever built, and your head should be clear. The personal thing is good. The professional thing is yours. Both can be true." "Both things can be true," Adaeze said. She had heard that sentence before, from someone else, in a different room. "Yes," Patience said. "Go sleep. You need 4 hours." On the 8th day, Kangmin appeared at her door. She had not called him. She had not asked. He knocked at 8 p.m., and when she opened the door, he had 2 containers of food from a kitchen. She knew he did not cook it himself, because she had been in that kitchen, and it was not a kitchen a person used for themselves. "You haven't eaten properly," he said. "How do you know that?" she said. He looked at her. Ani looked at the rings under her eyes and the papers on the table behind her and the very specific look of a woman running on determination and insufficient nutrition. He said nothing. He came in and set the food on the table. She ate. He sat across from her and watched her work, and when she needed to talk through the model, he listened, and when she needed to be silent, he was silent, and when she found the error in the third-year projections at 11 p.m. and made a sound that was profoundly undignified, he simply said, "Show me." And she showed him, and they worked through it together, and by midnight the model was clean and complete, and she sat back in her chair and felt the specific exhaustion of something finished. He looked at her. "Sleep," he said. "I'm fine," she said. "Adaeze," he said. She looked at him. And he was sitting across her table with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled to the forearm and his complete attention on her face. He looked nothing like the man at the gala. He looked exactly like himself. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight." He held her gaze. "The presentation will work," he said. It was not encouragement. It was assessment. The same precision he brought to everything. "Yes," she said. "It will." He stood. He picked up his jacket. He moved to the door. He stopped. "I spoke to my mother," he said. She looked at him. "The interference stops," he said. "I told her that what I choose is not subject to committee." He paused. She was not pleased. "She doesn't have to be pleased," Adaeze said. "No," he said. "She doesn't." He looked at her for a moment. "Good night," he said. "Good night," she said. He left. And she sat at her table and looked at the door for 30 seconds and then went to bed and slept for 6 hours and woke up and won the presentation. Director Lim said 2 things when it was over. She said, "The model is solid," and she said, "The vision is original." And then she set down her pen and looked at Adaeze across the table and said, "When do you want to start?" Adaeze said, "I already have." The funding came through in the following week, a real amount, Not a gesture, not a trial, but a real and structural amount that meant she was building something with a foundation rather than on hope. She called her mother. She called both sisters. She called Patience, who screamed loudly enough that Adaeze had to hold the phone away from her ear. She told Kangmin last, not because he was least important, because she wanted to tell him when she was alone and calm and could look at what she had built without sharing the looking. She called him at 7 in the evening from the window of her apartment with Seoul spread out below. It came through, she said. He was quiet for a moment. The good kind of quiet. I know, he said. Director Lim called you? She has a habit, he said. She laughed. She had not expected to laugh. It came out fully and without management, and she heard him, on the other end of the line, go quiet in the way he did when something had surprised him. What are you going to do first? He said. Find a kitchen, she said. A real one. Lease it. Make it mine. I know one, he said. Of course you do, she said. It's in Mapo, he said. Good access. Reasonable lease. One the previous tenant left it in excellent condition. And it belongs to someone in your network, she said. Everything in Seoul belongs to someone in my network, he said. That's unavoidable. You can still lease it from whoever you choose. She looked at the city. She looked at the lights on the Han River. She thought about kitchens and sauces and the way an agusi reduction had smelled in a stranger's kitchen 4 months ago. Send me the listing, she said. He sent it. It was exactly right. It was, genuinely and without irony, exactly right. She called to schedule the viewing, and the agent said the space had just become available, and she went and stood in the empty kitchen and felt the way she felt in every kitchen she had ever known was hers, which was that the room understood what it was for. She stood in it for a long time. She ran her hand along the counter. She opened the industrial refrigerator and closed it. She tested the hob and listened to the gas ignite. She stood in the center of the room and looked at the light coming through the high window at the back and thought about what this kitchen would smell like in 6 months when it was fully hers. She took out her phone. She took a photo of the kitchen from the center and sent it to her youngest sister with the caption, "This one." Her sister sent back, "That one." She put the phone in her pocket. She took it. 3 weeks after signing the lease, she went back to the Hyatt. Not for work. She went on her own on a Tuesday evening and sat at the bar and ordered sparkling water and looked at the room where everything had started. The charity gala had been dismantled for 3 months, and the room was set for a different kind of event, something corporate and slightly underdressed. She looked at the floor near the east entrance where she had stood with an empty tray and told a very powerful man that he had stepped into her path. She thought about that woman, the one with the tray. She had been confident then, too, but it had been the confidence of someone who had not yet been tested in this specific city, in these specific rooms. That woman had not known what was coming. She had not known the dinner in Yongsan, or the kitchen in Mapo, or the investor meeting, or the mother with the fish, or the man who said her name exactly right every single time without being asked. The barman brought her water. She thanked him in Korean. He smiled and moved away. She was still sitting there when Kangmin walked through the east entrance. And she had not told him she was here. He had not told her he was coming. He looked across the bar and saw her and stopped for exactly 1 second, the way he stopped sometimes when something arrived that he had not arranged, and then he came over and sat beside her and looked at the room. I come here occasionally, he said. Since when? She said. He held his water glass. Since October, he said. October was the gala. She looked at him. He looked at the room. He was composed and direct and completely himself, and he had apparently been coming back here since October. Seo Kangmin, she said. He looked at her. That is the most romantic thing you have ever said without meaning to, she said. He looked at his water glass. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. She looked at the room. The corporate event was beginning to fill. People in the kind of suits that worked for meetings. The bar was warm, the east entrance was lit. She thought about trays and paths and the specific chain of events that had no logic except the logic of 2 people being in the same place at the right time with enough of themselves present to notice. The issue came from a man named Director Wu, who sat in the corner of a restaurant where Adaeze was having dinner alone on a Wednesday, reviewing lease documents, and who she noticed because he had been at the charity gala and had been at the private dinner in Yongsan and was sitting in the corner now in a way that was neither coincidence nor accident. She looked at him. He looked at her. He did not look away. She finished her dinner. She packed her documents. When she walked to his table on her way out, "You've been at 3 of the same locations as me in 2 months," she said. "I'd like to understand that." Director Wu looked at her. He was in his 50s. He had the eyes of someone doing calculations behind everything else. "Miss Okonkwo," he said, "sit down, please." She sat. She put her bag on her lap and looked at him directly. 3 minutes, she said. "I'm busy." "You know what Seo Kangmin does," Wu said. "I know what he does legally," she said. "And the rest?" "That's not my business," she said. Wu looked at his hands. "There is a group," he said, "that has been watching the SEO organization for the past 18 months, the Incheon Authority. They believe the SEO network is expanding into territory that was previously negotiated neutral. And they are looking for a point of entry." He paused. "A woman with direct access who is not part of the organization, who moves freely between spaces, who would not be expected to be useful." Adaeze held his gaze. "You're asking me to inform on a man I'm personally connected to," she said. "I'm asking you to consider a very straightforward arrangement," he said. "No," she said. He blinked. "I'm not a point of entry," she said. "I'm a caterer building a business. Whatever is happening in the SEO organization has nothing to do with me. And more importantly," she picked up her bag and stood. "I don't become someone's tool. Not his mother's, not yours, not anyone's." She looked at him. "If you follow me to another location, I will tell him directly that you're there. I understand that makes your situation complicated. One that is a consequence I can live with." She walked out. Outside on the pavement, she breathed for 30 seconds. Not because she was shaken, because she needed to think clearly, and thinking clearly required controlled breathing, and she had learned that from years of kitchens where 4 things were on fire at once and only one of them was supposed to be. She made 2 calls. The first was to Patience, who confirmed that Director Wu moved in a circle adjacent to the Incheon Authority and had for years. The second was to Yuna, who answered on the first ring and said after Adaeze finished, "I'll let him know you're calling in 10 minutes, and hung up. She told Kangmin that same night. He was quiet for a long time when she finished. A different kind of quiet from all the others. The kind that had weight. "Wu," he said. "He gave me his name freely," she said, "which tells me he's not afraid of you knowing." "No," Kangmin said slowly. "He wouldn't be." He paused. "This is the Incheon group. They've been building something for a while. Using outside entry points is new." "What does it mean for you?" she said. He held the line for a moment. "It means the situation is moving," he said, "and I need to move faster." Another pause. "Thank you for telling me." "Obviously," she said. "Not obviously," he said. "You could have stayed out of it." "I don't stay out of things," she said. "I manage what's mine and I tell the truth about what I see. Those are the only rules I actually have." He was quiet again, a different quality this time, warmer, harder to define. "You know," he said, "when I picture the version of my life that is going well, you are very consistently in the picture." She sat down on the edge of her kitchen counter. "That's either very romantic or very alarming," she said. "Both," he said. "I've made my peace with it." She laughed again, the same unmanaged laugh, and she heard him do the thing on his end of the line that was as close to a laugh as he permitted in telephone range, which was more than she had expected from him and exactly what she had hoped for. The Incheon situation resolved in 3 weeks. She did not know the details. She did not ask for the details. What she knew was that Kangmin was unavailable for 5 of those days in a way that was non-negotiable, and that on the 6th day, he called her at 7 a.m. and said, "It's resolved," with the specific flat exhale of a man who had been doing something that required a great deal of sustained concentration and had finished. Those 5 days were the strangest stretch of time she had in Seoul. She was not worried about him exactly. She understood that his world had its own protocols and that people who moved through it safely were people who knew those protocols, and he clearly knew them because he had been moving through it for years. But the absence was specific. The kitchen was quiet. The Thursday dinner slot was empty on her calendar. She noticed the empty slot more than she had expected. She called her mother on the third night. As her mother talked for 45 minutes about her garden and her sisters and the new pastor and the road outside their building that had finally been repaved after 7 years, and at no point did Adaeze mention any of it, because her mother would have had questions, and the questions would have been pointed and accurate, and she was not ready. "You're quiet," her mother said. "I'm listening," Adaeze said. "You're quiet, and listening is different from just listening," her mother said. Her mother had always been able to hear the specific texture of silence down a phone line. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," Adaeze said. "Is it the company?" her mother said. "The company is fine," Adaeze said. "Better than fine." "Is it a person?" her mother said, with the specific neutrality of a woman leaving a door open. Adaeze looked at the window. Seoul was lit up. "Everything is fine, Mama," she said. "I'll call Sunday." She did not call Sunday. She called on Saturday because on Sunday Kangmin called first and said, "It's resolved," and she had spent the Saturday making a meal she had not made since she was in the London kitchen 2 years ago, a thing her mother had taught her that she made when she needed to feel continuous with the person she had always been. She ate it alone. It was good. The kitchen smelled like her mother's kitchen and also like Seoul, and also like something that belonged to her specifically in the way that only the things you've built from scratch belong to you. "Are you all right?" she said. "Yes," he said. "All right or fine," she said. He was quiet. "There's a difference," he said. "Yes," she said. "Man, there is." He breathed. "All right," he said. "Genuinely, I'm all right." "Good," she said. "Come to the kitchen. I have something that needs testing." He came to the kitchen. She had been developing a new menu for the first formal event she was catering under her own company name. He sat on the counter the way no one sat on that counter and ate everything she put in front of him with the focused attention he brought to every experience, and he told her what worked and what didn't, and she argued with him about 2 of the assessments, and he was right about one, and she was right about the other, and neither of them conceded gracefully, and the kitchen smelled extraordinary. And outside the window, Seoul moved through its permanent afternoon pace. She put the last plate in front of him. He tasted it. He looked at her. "Mon, this is the one," he said. She looked at the dish. She looked at him. "Yes," she said, "that's the one." He set down the fork. He looked at her across the counter. "The Incheon situation is permanently closed," he said. "Not suspended. Closed. The terms were documented and the documentation has teeth." He paused. "Wu will not be approaching you again." She held his gaze. "I handled Wu," she said. "I know," he said. "This is in addition." She picked up the empty plate. She turned to the sink. She said without turning around, "Your mother has been quiet." "She has accepted the situation," he said. "She has accepted the situation, or she is being strategic about the situation." He paused. "Both," he said. "Probably." She smiled at the sink. He could not see the smile. She did not mind. "She is very good," Adaeze said. "Mahan, I respect it." "She respects you," he said, in the tone of someone who had received this information from a source that did not deliver compliments lightly and had decided to pass it along. Adaeze turned. "She told you that." "She said you sat down in a room she uses for difficult conversations and ate the fish and looked at her directly," he said. "She said most people don't manage it." "It was very good fish," Adaeze said. He looked at her across the kitchen. The afternoon light was coming through at an angle. The kitchen smelled like egusi and doenjang and something they hadn't put a name to yet. He looked at her the way he had looked at her at the gala, at the window, at his own table, with the full weight of his attention and nothing filtered out. "I want to ask you something," he said. She looked at him. When she set down the cloth she'd been using, she leaned against the counter and looked at him and waited. "Stay," he said. She held the word. She had 5 months left on her contract. She had a company with funding and a kitchen with a lease and a menu that a managing director had called the best thing he'd eaten at a private event in Seoul. She had built everything she had come to build, and the question of where she built it next was a real one. "You're asking me to make a decision," she said. "I'm not asking you to make a decision about what you build," he said. "I'm asking you to decide where you build it." She looked at him. "There's a difference," she said. "Yes," he said. "John, there is." She stood in her kitchen in Mapo in the afternoon light with 7 years of building behind her, and a man across the counter who had understood the difference without being told to. And she thought about kitchens and cities and the specific way Seoul felt when you were inside it rather than moving through. "I'll need a bigger kitchen eventually," she said. "I know," he said. "And the company stays mine," she said, "entirely." "Obviously," he said. "And I'll travel," she said. "For events, for sourcing, for whatever the work requires. I don't clear that with anyone." "I know," he said. "And I'm not going to be careful about taking up space," she said. He looked at her. Something moved in his face. "Good," he said. "I would be bored if you were." She held his gaze. And she thought about a tray of champagne and a man who had not moved fast enough, and the specific absurdity of having built everything she was building from that 12-second collision. She thought about a card in a hotel envelope and a number in 3 words. She thought about her mother's voice and her sister's laughs and the kitchen in Accra, and this kitchen now, which was hers. "Ask me properly," she said. He looked at her. He got off the counter. He came around it and stood in front of her, and for the first time since she had known him, he was close in the way that was not professional and not accidental and not managed. He was close because he had decided to be. "Stay in Seoul," he said. "Build the company here. See what we are when neither of us is performing." She looked up at him. "What do you think we are?" she said. And he reached up and very carefully, with the specific care of a man who understood that some things had survived a great deal and deserved to be handled with the full knowledge of that, he touched her face. His thumb at her cheekbone, his palm against her jaw. "I think," he said, "we are something that would be a waste to leave unfinished." She held his gaze. She had built herself from scratch. She had crossed an ocean and a language and a cultural gap that most people would have called too wide, and she had built something real in a city that had not known her name. She had sat across a table from his mother and eaten the fish and not flinched. She had turned down an arrangement that would have made her useful to powerful people in exchange for being herself and nothing else. She put her hand flat on his chest. When she felt his heartbeat under her palm, she said, "The kitchen comes with me." "The kitchen is yours," he said. "I mean when we move," she said. He went still. He looked at her. Something in his face did the unmanaged thing completely and without reservation, the way she had been waiting to see it for weeks. "When we move," he said. "Eventually," she said, "when the lease is up and the company needs the space." He breathed. "Yes," he said, "the kitchen comes." She held his gaze for one more moment. She said, "Okay." He looked at her. He said quietly, "Okay?" "Okay," she said, "I'll stay." He kissed her in the kitchen in Mapo in the afternoon light, and it was exactly the kind of kiss that a person builds something from, warm and specific and entirely unhurried, the kind that knows it has time. Outside the window, Seoul moved through its afternoon in its permanent lit way, and the Han River was visible at the far edge of the district, and somewhere in Gangnam, a woman of 71 read her afternoon documents and said nothing, and was possibly working something out. The first event under the company's full name was in the spring, a private dinner for 40 in a garden space in Itaewon, the kind of event that got talked about, and that talking about led to the next one. Adaeze moved through the kitchen with 3 staff members she had hired and trained, and the menu she had built over 6 months from scratch, and the agusi reduction came out exactly as it had in Kangmin's kitchen on the first night, and the managing director from the original dinner was there and told 2 other people, and those 2 people called the following week. One, it was the kind of evening where everything worked. Not perfectly. The third course came out 3 minutes late because of a temperature calibration issue she had noticed at 6 p.m. and corrected with 7 minutes to spare. But with the specific competent grace of a kitchen that knew what it was doing, she had built that, She had hired those 3 staff members out of 41 applicants, tested each one in a working kitchen session, and taken the 3 who understood that cooking for other people was a form of precision and care, and not just execution. She had designed the menu and sourced the produce and built the service flow and tested every dish until it was exactly right, and then tested it twice more because right was not the same as consistent. Her youngest staff member, a 22-year-old from Jeju named Minji, found her in the kitchen at 9:15 when the last course had gone out and said very formally, "Chef Adaeze, the guests are asking about the second sauce." Adaeze looked up from the counter. "What about it?" "They want to know if it's available as a product," Minji said. She held out her phone, on which 4 separate guests had apparently asked the same question in the span of 15 minutes. Adaeze looked at the phone. She looked at the kitchen. She thought about a community center in Accra, and a market stall in Lagos, and a borrowed kitchen in London, and this one, which was hers. "Tell them I'll think about it," she said. Minji nodded and went back out with the visible energy of someone who had delivered good news successfully. Adaeze stood in the kitchen and looked at the pot on the back hob where the reduction had been, and thought about what it meant to have built something people wanted to take home. She had never let herself imagine that part out loud. The building, yes, the company, yes, but the thing that people wanted to keep, the thing that traveled, she had held that quietly because wanting it too loudly before it was real felt like a risk she wasn't ready to take. It was real. The managing director stopped her near the doorway when she came out to the garden. "Miss Okonkwo," he said, "I told 3 people tonight about the sauce at the CO dinner in October." He paused. They all said they'd already heard about it. "From you?" she said. "From the other people I told at the SEO dinner," he said. Annie had the expression of a man mildly amused by his own point. "A recommendation travels faster than the person making it. Your food is traveling." She thanked him. She watched him go back to his group. She stood in the doorway and understood that what he had just said was the kind of thing you built toward for years without knowing whether you'd reach it, and she had reached it, and it was real. Kangmin was at the back of the garden when the dinner ended, standing with a glass of water and his jacket on and his hands in his pockets, and his eyes on her when she came out of the kitchen. He had not been to the event as her support. He had been there as a guest. She had been very clear about the distinction. She came to stand beside him. She looked at the garden. The guests were moving toward the exit in the warm spring air. "On good night," she said. "Good night," he said. He looked at the garden. He looked at her. "The food was excellent." "The menu was excellent," she said. "The food was also excellent." He almost smiled, more than almost. "Yes," he said. "Both." She looked at the Han River visible over the rooftops of the district. She looked at Seoul doing what Seoul did, which was be large and lit and entirely indifferent to the specific things happening inside it. She looked at the garden where 40 people had eaten her food and called it something they would remember. She had built this. She had built it from a tray and a path and a decision to say exactly what was true at all times, in all rooms, regardless of who was listening. She took his hand. He looked at her. She looked at the garden. "Next month is bigger," she said. "I know," he said. I have 3 new clients from tonight." "I know," he said. "Stop knowing things before I tell you," she said. He pressed her hand. The almost smile went somewhere it hadn't gone before. "Impossible," he said. She laughed. He held her hand and she laughed, and the garden was warm, and the city was lit, and somewhere Chairwoman Seo was working something out, and somewhere Director Lim was updating her files, and somewhere in Accra, a kitchen remembered a woman who had stood in it at 22 and believed in the food before the food had done anything to deserve that belief. 6 months earlier, she had stood on a pavement in Seoul with an empty tray and told a stranger that he had stepped into her path. It was the truest thing she had said in years, because she had meant it in all the ways it could mean. The path was hers. When she had come to this city with a plan and a belief and a willingness to stand in rooms that were not built for her and be exactly herself in them. She had done that. She had done it in Kangmin's boardroom, and in the Gangnam Club, and in a supplier meeting, and in a conversation with a man named Wu on a street corner, and in a kitchen in Mapo, on an afternoon that smelled like something entirely her own. She had not come to Seoul to find this, but this had found her anyway, the way things you have not planned for find you when you are paying full attention to the life you are actually living. She looked at Kangmin. He was looking at her. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Kangmin." "You look," he said, "like a woman who knows exactly what she is doing." She looked back at the garden. She looked at the city. But she felt the weight of his hand in hers, and the warmth of the spring air and the specific settled feeling of a person who has arrived somewhere they chose. "Yes," she said, "I do." And that is where we find them, standing in a garden in Seoul in the spring with a company that is real and a future that is chosen and a city that has learned finally to make room. The necklace at Adaeze's throat, a small crescent her youngest sister had pressed into her hand at the airport the night she left Lagos, saying, "Carry this so you know where home is," caught the garden light when she breathed. It had caught the light in every room she'd been in since, every kitchen, every meeting, every pavement and lobby. She had carried it through all of it, and it had been the whole time pointing here, to this garden, this city, this hand in hers. Home was not the place she had left. Home was the place she had built. If this story moved you, if it made you laugh and then made you feel something you were not entirely prepared for, leave a comment and tell me which moment got you. Was it the tray in the path? Was it the fish in Gangnam? Was it the kitchen and the okay? Was it the man who learned her name correctly on the first try and never got it wrong again? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Like this video if you stayed till the end. Share it with someone who loves a story about a woman who refuses to be a variable. Subscribe because there are more of these coming and you do not want to miss them. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.